Hi, this is part 2 of the demonstration to show you how to change the size of a logical volume and also the file system that is living on that volume. Now remember, the logical volume is kind of like a lot on which you can build a house, and the file system is the house that is built on the lot. So that means if you're expanding, you want to change the lot size first, you want to expand the lot size first, and then you make the house bigger. When you want to shrink it, you want to do exactly the reverse. You want to make the house smaller before you shrink the size of the lot, because otherwise the house would be sitting on area that does not belong to the lot, and you can get into a lot of trouble because of that. Okay, so in order to shrink the size of a file system and also the lot size associated with it, what you need to do is to do it offline. In other words, you cannot do it while the file system is still mounted. So that means you have only a few options. The best option is to run a live system on this system where you want to have one of the partitions resized so that the volume the file system is not going to be mounted when you resize it. To do this with our virtual machine, what you need to do is to do it like this. KVM is the name of the command. What you want to do is to specify the live image as the CD-ROM device of the virtual server, and you specify the hard drive image as usual as the first hard drive, but you also want to specify dash boot menu equals on, just so that you can control which device to boot from. So once you run it this way, what you will see is the following screen. This part here, what you will see is you have to press F12 really quick when the virtual machine starts up, so that it will present you the boot menu. In the boot menu, you will see the first option is your hard drive. In this case, we have a tiny little hard drive which is only 2 gigabytes. The second one is our CD-ROM drive, and what you want to do is to start with the CD-ROM drive, which will start up our live image, except it is not using the live image on the physical machine itself. It is now using the live image on the virtual machine, on the virtual server. We have done this already last time when we installed Linux, and this time we're doing this again, but to use the live image CD as a rescue mechanism, as a alternative system, so that we can change the size of a partition. So I'm typing 2 right now to start with the DVD, and we have a familiar screen. You may not see the entire thing, but enough of that to show the usual. And this time what we want to do is to select non-persistent, and not only that, we'll press the tab key. When you press the tab key, it will show you the actual command that we use to start up the machine, and I'm pretty sure you cannot see the bottom part right now because the screen or the captured portion is not big enough to cover that. All I have to do is to type text at the end. So you need to do the same thing when you start it up. Just type text after you press the tab key, and then press the enter key. What that does is it will start up the live image, except with text, it won't start up the GUI. We don't need this GUI because the GUI is kind of bulky. It takes up a lot of RAM footprint, and for what we are trying to do here, we do not need it. And so this way it starts up faster, it does not require as much RAM, and it's better off this way. So the system will start up pretty much just like when you start up the physical machine using the live image, except in this case it is starting with the virtual machine. And we'll go ahead and log in as root. And this time when you log in as root, do not use the root password for your virtual server, because we are actually using the live image. So you have to use ball as the password of root. Now once we start up, let's check a few things. The first thing we want to check is what exactly are mounted here. This looks awfully familiar. You can see that it has a /live cow as one of the mount points, and it's mounted to tempfs or the RAM file system. That's perfectly fine because that's exactly where we want it to be. We don't want it to use the first hard drive at all, because that's what we are trying to change. That's what we're trying to reconfigure. The second thing we want to see is whether it can see the virtual the logical volume groups that we are supposed to handle. So what we want to do is to see type -ls /dev/vg0, because vg0 is the name of our volume group, and if the system correctly recognizes the LVM, it should have items like these. Okay, and then what we want to do, since we know the system understands that we have a LVM system, let's go ahead and use LV display on the one that we want to change, which is /var, because we know that var is too big for what we need in the system. And it shows right here that it has 500 MIB. Yours will be different because when we configure the system, we specify metric megabyte, and this is binary megabyte. I messed with the system a few times already, so mine doesn't look the same as yours. Alright, so we want to change the size of /var. Now remember, the file system is the house and the logical volume is the lot. We want to shrink the house first before we shrink the lot size. So that's really important. And to do that, what we'll do is we'll use resize e2fs to shrink the file system first. And what this will do is we'll shrink it to 256 megabytes. And I believe this is in metric megabytes and not in binary megabytes. And this command will prompt us to run e2fsck, which is to check the file system first. Because if you have a system that is corrupted to begin with, resizing that without checking it first can be very bad to the content on that file system. So we'll go ahead and run this first. It does not complain, everything is good. And it's also showing us that it has 512 blocks. In this case, one block is 1K, so this is actually 512 times 1024 times 1000. Alright, so now let's go ahead and change the size of the system. So we'll go ahead and rerun resize e2fs to 256 megabytes. So that's pretty much about half of the size, half of its original size. If we wanted to be exactly half, we should use 250 megabytes, but I'll just make it round to binary number, which is 256. And this time it runs just fine. Now, how do we confirm this? How do we confirm that the system is now 256 megabytes? Well, one quick and easy way is to run e2fsck again, because this time it will confirm that it has 256. Okay, this time it is using the binary megabytes. In other words, when we ran resize e2fs, the 256 M here is actually 256 MI, which is the binary megabyte instead of the decimal megabyte, which is good because LV extend or LV resize uses exactly the same unit, and that's what we'll do next. Now remember, we just shrunk the size of the house, so now it is safe to shrink the size of the lot where the house is sitting on. Okay. Now before we do that, let's do one more thing. Let's take a look at the logical volume itself. It's taking the logical volume is still 500 binary megabytes. So that means the house is now about half the size of the lot that it is occupying, which is a waste of space. So now we want to shrink the size of the lot to match the size of the house. And to do that, we say LV resize, specify the logical volume that we are changing. use dash uppercase L to specify the exact new size, which is 256 binary megabytes. And it checks with us because there's no way for the system to know whether the file system is at the most 256 binary megabytes, and we know that because we just double checked over here. And so we'll say yes, and it's successfully resized. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and double check that using LV display. It shows that it is 256 binary megabytes. And then the second thing we want to do is to check that the system is okay by running our E2FSCK again. And it shows everything is okay. Alright, so we have just changed the size of the var mount point for our virtual server. And we did that using the live image. We used the live image as a rescue CD and use its utilities to help us resize a partition that we could not resize when it is active. So we're doing this offline. So now what we need to do is to reboot again and prepare to press F12 so that we can control the system to start or to boot from the so-called hard drive. It's a so-called hard drive because this is a virtual machine, so the so-called hard drive is really just one big file in the host operating system. So we type 1 this time. It starts with our installed operating system. And we'll log in as root again. But this time you cannot use the password ball because we are not using the live image. You have to use the same password that you specified when you ran the installer, and yours will be different from mine. I get into the system. The first thing I want to do is to check the size of each mounted volume, and we can see that /var is now the size is 246 megabytes. Of which 129 megabytes is available. So we'll also check LV display to check with the logical volume itself, and it is 256 binary megabytes. You can see that the two numbers do not match. This is 256 binary megabytes, and this is for 248 I think it is metric megabytes. And that's because this is counting how much space is actually available to the system, not counting the overhead of the file system. Whereas this one is really just the entire thing, including the overhead, how big it is, and that's why these two numbers do not usually match up. What you want to do to double check that it does match up is to use E2FSCK, to check the file system, or one of the other commands. Yes, there's nothing here, but there are other commands to show you the information of an extension 2 or an extension 3 system. So this concludes this part 2 concludes our exercise to learn how to resize a logical volume, which is the lot, and also how to resize the file system, which is the house that is sitting on the lot. So you have to remember which one is which one. When you're expanding, when you are making it bigger, you have to extend the lot size first, and then you expand the house to match the size of the lot. If you're shrinking, you have to do it offline, because you cannot do it. You cannot resize a file system when it is to make it smaller when it is active, when it is mounted. And the second thing is you have to shrink the house first before you shrink the lot on which the house is sitting. Alright, so I hope you remember most of this stuff. And once again, also, if you want to learn how to use those commands, use the manual, the online manual. The few commands that we have used, one is resized E2FS. The other one is LV resize. Another one is LV extend. and another one is LV display. If you watch this video clip again, you can definitely try to write some notes and remind yourself what commands we have used so far and how they are used in this case. Thanks for watching, and the next video will be recorded tomorrow. Well, actually later today after I get some sleep, and that's going to be about the network card and how do we configure the system's networking capability, and also how do we configure how a host operating system can talk to a guest operating system using the quote-unquote network. So I'll talk about that later, and good night.